The NBA trade deadline is 2 weeks away, and we've already seen major names get moved this season, such as Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, and Terry Rozier. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at every NBA team's most likely trade candidate ahead of the 2024 deadline on February 8th. So we're going to start things off with the Toronto Raptors, and we're going to mention the guy that they got back in the Siakam deal in Bruce Brown. Brown got a nice contract from the Indiana Pacers in the 2023 offseason, but it's very team friendly. The Raptors can decide to decline his team option in the 2024 offseason for $23 million. So that can incentivize a contending team to go out and get Bruce Brown, who's one of the better players on the Denver Nuggets championship team last year, and he's averaging a respectable 12 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3 assists this season. So for the New York Knicks, it could be 2 different players. Throughout this whole season, it was going to be Evan Fournier in this spot, but as of late, Quentin Grimes has been getting a lot of momentum to get traded at this deadline if it's in a deal for somebody like a DeJounte Murray. But I'll talk about Fournier here. The reason I think Fournier could definitely get moved is because he has a very tradable contract with the Knicks, and he has a team option this offseason as well. So you're basically just guaranteeing him $18.5 million for the 24 season, and you can get out of the $19 million team option. And if the Knicks wanted to target like a Malcolm Brogdon or a Jordan Clarkson, Fournier can match up with that perfectly. But if the Knicks look to go make a bigger splash at the trade deadline for somebody like I just mentioned, DeJounte Murray, that player could be Quentin Grimes. The Brooklyn Nets should definitely be more of sellers at the deadline and try to accumulate some draft capital. And a player that I think they can get at least 1 first-round pick for is Dorian Finney-Smith, who's averaging around 9 points and 5 rebounds this year for the Brooklyn Nets. He has struggled efficiency-wise since being inserted into the starting lineup, but he's still shooting 38% from 3 this season. And he's got a very team-friendly contract as well, $14 million guaranteed this year, $15 million guaranteed next year, and then a player option for $15.5 million in 2026. So you could definitely expect contenders to be calling Brooklyn and seeing if they can trade for Dorian Finney-Smith at the deadline. I feel like the 76ers do not want to trade for anybody that has a guaranteed contract after this season because they want an open cap sheet this offseason to possibly make a splash in free agency or in the trade market. But a player that they've definitely made available over the last couple of weeks is KJ Martin, one of the younger pieces that they got in the James Harden deal. And Martin really hasn't played at all this year for the 76ers. Obviously, veterans ahead of him in the rotation like Nick Batum, Marcus Morris, and Patrick Beverley are getting minutes over the 23-year-old. So for somebody that averaged 12.7 points just 2 years ago on the Rockets on 57% shooting, could definitely go for a couple seconds at the deadline, and I expect Philly to do something like that. So for Boston, I kind of wanted to talk about Peyton Pritchard, but I think they're going to hold on to him after the deadline. So I think what's most likely going to get moved is the $6.2 million trade exception that they got in the Grant Williams sign and trade with Dallas over the offseason. Boston has been desperately looking to upgrade their bench as well, so you could see guys like Luke Cornett, O'Shea Brissett, or Delano Banton being included in one of these deals. Buddy Hield wanted an extension with the Pacers over the offseason. They weren't willing to give him that, so Hield actually requested a trade before the season started, if you remember that. But I'm going to go with Obi Toppin as their most likely trade candidate since they just acquired Pascal Siakam. They just spent a top 10 pick on Jarris Walker in the 2023 draft, and Toppin was averaging 25-ish minutes before the Siakam deal, and his minutes have been very inconsistent since the deal happened with Toronto. So I do see Indiana trying to maybe get a couple second rounders in exchange for Toppin, or if they could flip him for somebody more defensive minded at the deadline, because there's pretty much a logjam at that power forward spot going forward since they do want to re-sign Siakam. I know he's been there for a while, but I think the Bucks would try to move Pat Connaughton ahead of the trade deadline just because Connaughton does have a tradable contract as well, making around $9.5 million this year. He is guaranteed $9.5 million next year, which could deter some teams from trying to trade for him. But hey, younger teams that have cap space like the Hornets, the Pistons, the Wizards should definitely try to get Connaughton if they can get some draft capital in return. And you could also see somebody like Campaign traded along with Connaughton as well. All right, the Chicago Bulls should probably think about trading everybody at this deadline. It should be Vucevic, it should be DeRozan, and I think 2 guys are a little bit more likely than those, and that is Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso. I will say that Alex Caruso is more likely to get traded just because of his contract, $9.5 million this year and just under $10 million guaranteed next year. So this would be a lot easier for teams to trade with. And I think Chicago can still get multiple protected first-round picks in exchange for Caruso. Just what he's done on the defensive side of the floor this year is a very good offensive player as well in his role. And I think he's just more likely to get moved than LaVine right now. I think LaVine's trade could be in the offseason for teams that maybe had a disappointing end to their 2024 year in the playoffs. And he's had multiple injuries this year, so I think that's going to scare teams from trying to trade multiple assets to get Zach LaVine, who's going to turn 29 very soon. It seems like the Detroit Pistons are trying to add talent at at the deadline, and I doubt that they want to move any of their young players this year, like Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Asura Thompson, and Marcus Sasser, obviously. So somebody I think that they could move that's not Bojan Bogdanovic is Alec Burks. Alec Burks is 32 years old. He's actually shooting better from 3 than he is from the field. He's shooting 40% from 3 this season and 39.2% from the field. He's also shooting 90% from the line. He's making $10 million this year as well, so teams could look to get off of multiple year deals in exchange for Burks. Like we could see a Connaughton for Burks swap if the Pistons can get multiple second rounders from Milwaukee. And over Burks' last 12 games, he's playing around 24.5 minutes a night, and he's averaging 19.5 points and shooting 47% from the field and 49% from 3. Cleveland really doesn't want to trade anybody notable at the deadline, like they're not moving Donovan Mitchell or Jarrett Allen. So I think somebody that could get moved is Karis LeVert, who did sign an extension with Cleveland over the offseason and is due $15 million this year and $16.5 million next year. But LeVert could be appealing to some teams that are looking for some scoring off the bench, averaging around 16 points this year and 4 assists, but he's shooting 42% from the field, 34% from 3, and 74% from the line. So pretty inefficient with that volume, but I'm sure Cleveland would like to flip his offensive ability for some defensive ability at the deadline. Maybe a trade partner with Orlando for Jonathan Isaac. It's funny, when I was drafting out this video, I had the Miami Heat's trade candidate as a very easy selection. It was Kyle Lowry, but now that he's been moved for Terry Rozier, I'm going to go with Josh Richardson. Richardson is making around $3 million this year and a $3 million player option next year. He's averaging 9.5 points with the Heat this season, shooting 43% from the field and 34% from 3. An elite free throw shooter though at 94%. Still a solid defender as well. That could be appealing to some teams at the deadline. Miami Heat's cap sheet is very difficult to try to make a trade, especially if they don't want to part ways with Nikola Jovic at the deadline. So I do wonder if Miami has another deal in place. For the Washington Wizards, you can go with a plethora of players, but I'm going to go with the expiring contract of Tyus Jones. Jones, who is making $14 million this year and is an unrestricted free agent in the 2024 offseason, could still net Washington a first-round pick in my opinion. Jones is averaging 12.5 points and 6 assists this year for the Wizards, but he's also been super efficient as well, 51% from the field and 42% from 3. As a smaller guard though, there are question marks about his defensive ability, especially in the playoffs. But for a team that is looking for a playmaker either in the starting lineup or off the bench, could be willing to give up a first-round pick in a few weeks for him. And yeah, for Charlotte, I also had Terry Rozier as the most likely trade candidate as well, but since he's been moved, I'm going to go with Miles Bridges. I think he's a little bit more likely to get traded than a Gordon Hayward due to his contract, and same thing with PJ Washington since Bridges is an expiring contract. I mean, Bridges is averaging 21 points and 7 rebounds this year for the Hornets. He's shooting 46% from the field and 35.5% from 3. He's still just 25 years old, but yeah, if I was a team, I would not want to trade for Bridges. Obviously, there's a PR nightmare, and I really don't think you should give this guy another contract in the league, but I do think there's a good chance that he's the highest probability Hornet to get traded at the deadline. So for the Orlando Magic, you could talk about Jonathan Isaac here as well, but I'm going to go with Markelle Fultz. Fultz is going to be a free agent at the end of this year. He's making $17 million right now. Fultz is having somewhat of a down year compared to last year, averaging just 8 points a night. In only 12 games this year, he has dealt with injuries, which has been a storyline of his career. But with the emergence of Jalen Suggs, they spent a top 10 pick on Anthony Black, and they extended Cole Anthony before the season started. Fultz is kind of the odd man out there. So I wonder if a team like San Antonio would try to acquire him and try to pair him up with Wemby in that pick and roll. Man, the Atlanta Hawks are having one of the most disappointing seasons in the NBA this year. They're below 500, they're not in a playoff spot at the moment, and it really doesn't make any sense because this team is really talented. But I guess just with all the rumors, I feel obligated to put DeJounte Murray in this spot. If I were running the Atlanta Hawks, I would not move him. You just extended him for 4 years, and that contract doesn't even start till next year. So I would give it a little bit more time with him and Trae Young. You have a rising star in Jalen Johnson as well. It seems like Atlanta is deciding to move on from DeJounte Murray, and he could definitely net them a good return. It seems like they're looking for multiple first-round picks and a starting caliber player. And if Atlanta is 100% serious about moving him, he's definitely going to be one of the best players on the market now that Pascal Siakam has been traded. The Sacramento Kings did float out names like Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes when they were trying to acquire Pascal Siakam from the Raptors, but I think somebody that's a little bit more likely to get moved is Davion Mitchell. So he was originally drafted 9th overall in the 2021 draft, so he's due $5 million this year, and he already got his team option picked up for 2025 at $6.5 million. Mitchell hasn't really played a ton this year. For the Kings, minutes-wise, he's averaging around 12.5 minutes a night. His efficiency has not been good whatsoever, but a team may try to buy low on him for his defensive upside. I feel like a bunch of Lakers could potentially get moved at the deadline, but somebody I think is the most likely candidate because of his tradable contract is D'Angelo Russell. Russell, efficiency-wise, is having a fine year with the Lakers. 48% from the field and 41% from 3. Obviously, there's some defensive limitations with him, and LA may try to leverage him for a much larger deal if they are actually trying to go out and get somebody like a DeJounte Murray at the deadline. But you could also mention a guy like Rui Hashimura Hachimura in this spot as well. I don't think Golden State moves Klay Thompson at the deadline, but somebody that they could get really good value for if they're still trying to win now and are serious about competing this year is Jonathan Kuminga. Personally, I would not move Kuminga because there's a good chance Klay isn't back next year. You may take a step back, and Kuminga's just 21 years old. You want to develop him. He definitely could have headlined a Pascal Siakam deal, but I totally get not wanting to move him for a possible expiring. But it seems like that relationship with Kuminga and Kerr isn't great at the moment, and I do wonder what Mike Dunleavy as a rookie GM is going to do at the deadline, because the Warriors desperately need to make some type of move if they're serious about making the playoffs this season. Obviously, the Suns don't have many guys that have a ton of value that are realistic trade options at the deadline. Like, they're not moving anybody of their big three. I don't think anybody wants to take on that Nurkic contract. Grayson Allen could definitely net some value as well because he's been good this year, especially when guys like Bradley Beal have been hurt this year. Like, Allen has been shooting 50% from the field, 49% from three, and 90% from the line. But I would definitely hold on to him if I were Phoenix. So I think something they could move is a guy like Nasir Little. He's averaging 5 points, shooting 48% from the field. He's a hustle guy. He plays solid defense. He's not going to light the world on fire, but he's still fairly young, and he is making $6.5 million this year, but he's also due $6.5 million next year, $7.2 million in 26, and over $7.5 million in 27, but he's still just 23 years old, so maybe a rebuilding team wants to take a flyer on him, and the Suns could get back a veteran role player that could help them try to win a championship this season. I think this is pretty easy for the LA Clippers, and it's going to be PJ Tucker. Tucker has pretty much been out of the Clippers rotation since November 27th. He's 38 years old, and he could definitely just be a salary match with a team that has a similar contract. Like, he's making $11 million this year and has an $11.5 million player option next year. Shout out to Daryl Morey for that contract. And he's definitely going to pick up that player option. But yeah, like, a rebuilding team could leverage their cap space to take on PJ Tucker and could maybe take a flyer on one of the Clippers' younger players like a Kobe Brown or a Terrence Mann. I think like Alec Burks could be a perfect match, but I do wonder if the Clippers are really looking for a big man in return rather than another wing. Okay, so for OKC, it's pretty much Davis Bertans, but I kind of wanted to talk about draft capital instead. I mean, Bertans is a $17 million contract this year, but $16 million next year as well. And if he finds his three-point shot back, he could actually be a good role player for a team that trades for him. But I think OKC can definitely leverage one of their first-round picks and Bertans' contract to make a splash at the deadline. And why not? OKC could really contend for a conference finals appearance this year. They've been one of the better teams in the NBA throughout the whole season, and they just have so many draft picks. You can't just keep drafting 3 to 4 rookies every year, so why not make a nice splash at the deadline, moving Bertans' contract and some draft capital to upgrade your team, specifically in that front court. So the Minnesota Timberwolves have been linked to a reunion with Tyus Jones at the deadline if they were going to make a trade with Washington. And obviously Minnesota doesn't want to trade any of their top guys. They definitely don't want to move Naz Reid either. So I think slow-mo Kyle Anderson could be a perfect contract to match up with at the deadline. He's making $9.2 million this year, and it's an expiring contract. Slow-mo's defense has definitely taken a step back this season. They don't really have any draft capital to move since they gave up a lot of that in the Rudy Gobert deal. But hey, maybe you attach like a Wendell Moore in this deal or Leonard Miller, and you can get a really nice upgrade for a forward spot off the bench, or even it's an upgrade over Mike Conley in that starting lineup at the point guard position. Okay, for the Denver Nuggets, it's really tough because I believe, and I'm sure they believe, that they can win a championship again this year with their current roster. So I don't think that they're going to move guys like Zeke Naji, Julian Strawther, or Peyton Watson at the deadline, and I don't think they're trading any of their larger contracts like KCP, and definitely not guys like Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, and Jokic. So I think Vlatko Cancar could get moved at the deadline. Vlatko's making around $2.5 million this year, and he just has a $2.3 million team option next year. So you can maybe attach him with the multiple seconds to find like a bench upgrade at the deadline. Maybe they attach him with Reggie Jackson, but I know they like Reggie a lot, so I didn't really want to mention him here. Portland could definitely look to move multiple guys at the deadline. They've been rumored to move Robert Williams, who is out for the year though, but could be appealing to some team that's looking after this season and onwards. But I'm going to talk about Malcolm Brogdon here. I think they should definitely move him at the deadline. He's averaging 15.5 points in his age 31 season. And for a team that's looking for a shot creator or just a bench playmaker to try to make a championship run, should definitely go out and acquire Brogdon. He's making $22.5 million this year and next year, which should drive down his value just a little bit. He's been rumored to the Knicks a ton as well, and the Lakers, so I could definitely see the Blazers moving him at the deadline to the highest bidder. If the Utah Jazz were looking to make a trade, I went back and forth between two players, Kelly Olynyk and Jordan Clarkson. Clarkson is very similar to Caris LeVert in that sense, where he's putting up nice scoring numbers at 18 points a night, but his efficiency hasn't been great great, 42% from the field and 31% from three. He's pretty inconsistent as a primary scorer, but maybe in a lesser volume role, like on the New York Knicks, who I'm going to go back to, or the LA Lakers, who are looking for some shot creators off the bench, could definitely look to target Clarkson if his value has definitely diminished a little bit throughout the first couple of months of the season. He's averaging 5 assists this year, which is pretty nice, which is a career high as well, so that could be appealing to some teams as well. I'm sure Dallas thinks they can go all in this year as well, so I wonder if they are going to look to move a younger player like a Josh Green. Green is making $4.7 million this year, but then north of $12 million for the next 3 years after the extension he signed in the offseason. And Green has definitely taken a step back for the Mavericks this year, which is a shame because I think a lot of us thought he could break out entirely. He's still a good 3-point shooter and could be an appealing role player to some rebuilding teams, and that contract could be easy to match up with some other teams at the deadline. The Rockets would definitely be thrilled to just make the play-in tournament this season, so I don't think they're going to trade any of their top names, but somebody they could look to move is Jock Landale, who's making $8 million this year, and it is $8 million a year for the next 3 years, but none of those years are fully guaranteed, so that makes it an easy to move contract, and they have a plethora of draft picks as well, most notably from Brooklyn and the James Harden deal from a couple years ago, so Houston can look for an upgrade in that sense. San Antonio is a tough team to figure out as well because they have a lot of young players and they're an obviously rebuilding team as well, and they don't want to give up those guys, so I'm going to talk about Doug McDermott here. McDermott is playing around 15.5 minutes a night for the Spurs this year. He's taking about 4.7 shots a night, but he is shooting 44% from three, and it's an expiring contract as well, making $13.7 million this year, so a team that is looking for some shooting off the bench could look to target McDermott from San Antonio. I had a tough time figuring out who I wanted to talk about for the New Orleans Pelicans, so Pels fans, you can let me know in the comments if you disagree with me here, but I'm going to talk about Jonas Valanciunas. So Valanciunas is a free agent at the end of the year. He's 31 years old. I'm questioning to think if there's a reunion with him in New Orleans. And with guys like Miles Turner and Jared Allen definitely off the market, it may be tough for them to find an upgrade at the center spot, but his contract is definitely tradable. They're obviously not moving any of their core of Zion, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, Jordan Hawkins, and Dyson Daniels. So Valanciunas may be the odd man out if a deal is in place for the Pels. And finally, for the Memphis Grizzlies, we're going to be talking about Marcus Smart. He's currently missing some time right now with a severe right finger injury, and his efficiency has been down this year, like guys like Karis LeVert and Jordan Clarkson, shooting 43% from the field and 31% from three. But he still won a Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. He's still a good guard defender, and there's a bunch of contending teams that are looking to upgrade their defensive side of the ball at the deadline. And Smart is making $18 million a year, which teams can definitely match and look to acquire his defensive prowess here at the deadline. So I hope you guys did enjoy the video. Let me know if you did by dropping a thumbs up. Also, please let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of these picks. Also, I have some new stuff for you guys as well. I launched my Patreon. Link to that is in the description. Going to be going full in on content on that going forward. Already have my first scouting report up there. That is free to read about Robert Dillingham. Also back on the gram as well. You can follow my Instagram. Link to that is in the description. Like always, my Twitter is there as well. And yeah, I'm super excited. I'm definitely going to be live streaming the trade deadline as well. And that's going to be super fun like always. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I love you guys and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.